I don't really know where it started other than I remember being very young, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And I remember seeing images that made me feel good. I remember it started with the earliest ones I can remember were things like lingerie catalogs that would come in the mail, like the Victoria's Secret catalog or the Macy's catalog. And so it became this easy way to access a source of feeling good. And it wasn't like I had some traumatic experience that then I had to soothe with pornography. It was all the micro traumas, all the micro moments of not getting my needs met, of feeling lonely or feeling different or not getting attention from my parents. And this was a way to soothe and to feel good and to feel powerful and to experience some pleasure. And so it grew over time into something that I reliably could get a little hit of dopamine.
What do you do?
So I'm a men's coach, meditation teacher, former scientist. These days, I really spend most of my time doing coaching with men with porn addiction. And I don't know if this is important to say, but coaching is its own kind of thing, is separate from therapy. There's a lot of overlap, but coaching really is about empowering people to move their life forward. It's something I'm really passionate about.
Nice. This is a complete aside, but did you deliberately go down the coaching route versus therapy for a reason?
Since kind of really learning about what coaching is, I actually have come to fall in love with it in a way. And what's really interesting is a lot of my clients, they say that they've done lots and lots of therapy and they have a lot of self-awareness. They know what their issues are, but they just haven't changed it and they keep going in these circles. And coaching is really about taking action and empowering people to take action and have accountability and take real steps in their life and learn from those actions. And so I do actually really love it, especially for the work of porn addiction recovery.
Yeah, no, I definitely think through some of my research, I've come across how men tend to think, generally speaking, and men are quite focused on action and behavior, and they think in a linear fashion. And there's plenty of research that suggests a resistance to therapy. And I think, actually, I haven't got a kind of data around this, but I feel like men are probably more drawn to coaching, given that kind of forward-looking, linear, behavioral type focus. Yeah, no, interesting. And I guess the main question for this interview is like, why porn addiction? Like, why do you support in that? And what's your own story and experience?
Yeah, the main reason I support people in this is because it's something that I went through myself, something I experienced personally for most of my childhood, into my teens, into my young adult life, and in college and university. I was hiding, my porn use from friends, family, everyone. I was ashamed of it. And it developed into a real compulsive behavior, a real addiction. And it was something that through a lot of work and a lot of introspection and personal development, I was able to break free from that addiction and change my life. And that was such a monumental shift in my life. It had such an impact on me that I realized that if I could help other guys do the same thing, it was just a really meaningful thing that I could devote my life to. And also just knowing how many people struggle with this issue in silence. They don't know where to get support. They don't feel comfortable talking about it. And so if I could help them by just being vulnerable myself and talking about it openly and give a little bit of a permission slip for other people to talk about it, if they can see me talking about my experience with it, it can give some guys courage to open up about it themselves and talk to a therapist or talk to a coach or talk to a friend. So there's so many reasons why I started working in this area. But ultimately, I think it's a gateway. My work on the outside ostensibly is about porn addiction and porn addiction recovery, but it's really everything. It's all the ways that we escape, numb out, procrastinate, try to avoid our feelings and emotions. And so a lot of the work that I do with guys, it's not just about porn, it's about video games, alcohol, drugs, work, all the ways that we escape and get addicted to numbing out.
Yeah, thanks. Really articulate. And I want to come back to that point because I think it's really important that this is more about the psychology of addiction, right? And the behavior behind addiction and where that comes out for people. It can be anything. I mean, I've seen, you see the ones like alcohol, which is the one that's talked about the most, alcohol and drug, but then you see it come out in places like fitness or work, which is a whole other kettle of fish because that stuff is glorified, quote unquote.
Right.
Definitely want to come back to that piece. Just to take it back, like in pure layman terms, how would you describe a porn addiction? And I know that sounds really simple, but yeah, how would you describe it? And at what point is something like just something maybe someone does for a bit of fun or a bit of release to flipping over into an addiction?
Yeah. I think we need to reframe the way we look at the word addiction as opposed to this binary on or off, or like you either have it or you don't. It's a spectrum, and it's something that comes and goes. It's something that can be at varying degrees, but really it's looking at any kind of behavior and looking at the overall impact on your life. And if the overall impact is negative and you keep doing it despite those negative consequences, then you could classify it as an addiction. If there's this sense of you keep doing this thing despite the harm it's causing, then you could classify it as an addiction. And it is a spectrum. For some people, it has mild but negative consequences, and their life can improve by letting it go. But it might not be a priority. It might be that if they never get to it, their life is still going to be okay. But for other people, it is destroying their life. It's getting them engaged in things that are illegal, things that can send them to prison. It might be ruining their relationships, escalating to infidelity or to prostitution. It can also just be the way that it impacts your ability to engage with your work. If it's a major procrastination tool and causing you to not engage with your work the way you should be. So there's so many ways that it can impact your life. And the question of, am I addicted to porn or do I have a porn addiction? It comes down to a self-assessment where you have to look holistically. What are the ways that this is impacting my life positively? And what are the ways that this is impacting my life negatively? And if it is impacting my life negatively and I continue to do it despite knowing the harm it's causing, then you got to really ask yourself, is this something I'm addicted to? I don't care if people use the word addiction, or if some people want to use the word compulsive behavior. And some people say, oh, there's a difference, or you can't be addicted. It's all semantics at some point. It's like we understand people can be addicted to social media. People can be addicted to shopping. People can be addicted to gambling. In the same way, people can be addicted to pornography because it's highly rewarding on a dopaminergic level, and it can be addictive. In terms of the addiction question, it's not like if you watch more than 45 minutes per day, then you're addicted. It's not that simple.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it makes sense. And what are, picking up on a thread you said that, what are some of the positives to watching it? Because I think you often just hear the negatives, right? It's bad for you.
Yeah.
But like anything, I don't think anything or most things aren't inherently good or bad, right? They just are, and it's how you use it and how it impacts you. What are actually some of the positives people get out of it?
Yeah, if it didn't have any positives, people wouldn't develop an addiction around it. It clearly is doing something for them. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, what is this doing for me? Or what has it done for me in the past? A lot of addictions come from things that were beneficial in the past. They were beneficial in the sense of they provided some comfort, some relief when you needed it. Often when you're a kid and you aren't getting your needs met, and it was a way to soothe yourself or medicate. And that's one of the avenues that you could look at of one of the potential quote unquote benefits is it making you feel soothed or comforted when you're dealing with stress. It's giving you some distraction, some pleasure, obviously. You could also make some arguments that it's helping you learn about your sexuality, but you can also make the argument that it is tampering with your sexuality and morphing it and changing it because of the influence of it. So there's so many gray areas here, but in terms of the benefits, some of it is just, it gives me some pleasure, gives me an escape. And those are benefits to a certain degree.
And I've read before that for some people, and I think particularly men, I don't know if that's fair to say, or maybe it's because most men watch or whatever, but it also can feel, and this is where it can become dangerous in a way, but it can also feel like safe. They don't
Mhm.
worry about being rejected, and they can live out fantasy
Totally.
and stuff like that, which is, again, I guess like anything, right? There's a spectrum. That's good to a point. When you can become too isolated and too removed.
Yeah, you're really touching on something there, which is that even a benefit? It's like, I don't really know where it started other than I remember being very young, uh, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And I remember seeing images that made me feel good. I remember it started with
Right.
the earliest ones I can remember were things like lingerie catalogs that would come in the mail, like the Victoria's Secret catalog or the Macy's catalog, the underwear section. And comic book characters. I remember seeing certain comic book characters where I was like, wow. And something felt good in my body. And learning about touching myself while looking at these images, that also felt good. And so it became this easy way to access a source of feeling good. And there wasn't one big incident. It wasn't like I had some traumatic experience that then I had to soothe with pornography. It was all the micro traumas, all the micro moments of not getting my needs met, of feeling lonely or feeling different or not getting attention from my parents. And this was a way to soothe and to feel good and to feel powerful and to experience
Mhm.
some pleasure. And so, in the secrecy of my bedroom and the secrecy of the bathroom, it grew over time into something that I reliably could get a little hit of dopamine. And concomitantly, it happened similarly with things like sugar. Sugar was a big source of dopamine for me. I would sneak candy bars and I would secretly go to
Mhm.
convenience stores and buy candy bars and enjoy that little hit of dopamine from the sugar. Um, and so it wasn't just porn, it was all these ways that I was learning that, ooh, pleasure could make me escape.
So it wasn't, because I've spoken to a couple of people on other areas of addiction like gambling and alcohol, and what came through from their stories was a real feeling of, in one case, anxiety, like real insecurity and anxiety. Another place was a real lack of self-worth and self-confidence. They turned to the things that they did because it took away that feeling and gave them a better feeling. They felt confident or whatever it might be. But for you, it didn't really come from this place of insecurity or mental health issue or something so much. It was more just you felt good and you wanted to replicate that.
Yeah. I would adjust that by saying it did come from these things like insecurity or lack of self-worth or isolation. It was just that it wasn't like my life story had this one overarching theme. Oh, my insecurity was the reason. I experienced all of those. I experienced fear. I experienced rejection. I experienced loneliness. And all of those negative emotions were things I didn't want to feel. And all of them were reasons that I got sucked into pleasure. And the reason that I say that is to normalize that one of the reasons it's so addictive is it's a safe way to approach a woman. I'll speak from a male heterosexual perspective. It's a safe way to get your sexual needs met, at least to a certain degree, without any risk, without the fear of rejection. The problem is it's not really getting your intimacy needs met. Having sex with a woman on a screen, you're not actually engaging with real humanity. You're not getting your needs for intimacy and vulnerability and connection met. And so it feels like a safe way to get your needs met, but you're not actually getting that need met.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And for you, like, where did it start? Why did you, if it's as clear cut as this, but why did you turn to it? Yeah, why was it a release for you? And why did it become an addiction?
Yeah, you don't have to have some TED Talk life story of this was the big thing that I overcame. It can just be the fact that growing up as a young boy or a young girl or anything is really challenging.
Mhm.
And when you don't have other healthy coping mechanisms and you find something that in secret gives you that little needle of injection to make yourself feel good. That's what it was for me. It was all those things. And I had all these things. I got teased as a kid, and probably there were certain times where I didn't get the attention I wanted from my parents, and times where I got rejected by girls, and all kinds of things. And these were the coping mechanisms.
Yeah, thanks for capturing that. Because I have a couple of stories that I've done, which are those like TED Talk stories.
Yeah.
And actually, I like that. But I keep trying to bring it back to I want what you said, which is just more relatable and something that every person can go through. Sort of moving on to the impact that it's having, it's pretty well documented that porn, well, as we said, it's subjective where it's good or bad, but there are instances where it seems to be having a negative impact on people and on men in particular, but probably women as well. But there's kind of two threads I want to explore. There's this, I don't know if there's studies around this, but I've read articles on teachers, for example, reporting that young boys are now quite violent sometimes in their first sexual experience because that's what they've learned to do through porn. So that's one strand I want to get into. And then the other one is the impact it's having on sexual function, like erectile dysfunction and woman anxiety, and how it's, that disconnect between physical intimacy when people come to it doesn't feel as good or as real or whatever it might be. So I guess, treat them as two separate strands if they need to be. But what impact do you see, or what opinion do you have on the impact on those two strands?
Yeah, those are both very powerful topics to explore. I mean, the one with young kids, it's even worse than that. It's young boys are getting influenced by this in really harmful ways, and young girls are getting influenced as well. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, if you log on to Pornhub right now and just go to the homepage and you take a sample of the top 100 videos, the majority of them are increasingly aggressive and violent towards women, demeaning. They're propagating stereotypes, racial stereotypes. There's a lot of choking and slapping and name calling. And it's just very common now. Anal is also it's basically like almost as common as normal sex. You just see it, and every porn star is into it and does it. And beyond all those more obvious ones, there's also the subtle ways that it affects our views on intimacy. For example, like around consent. You never see a girl turning down sex in a porn video. It just doesn't happen. And so young boys and girls who are watching this are getting the message that if you make an advance, the girl will be receptive. And even if she resists at first, she's just playing hard to get. And if you push harder, then she'll end up liking it. And so this is the education that young boys are getting and young girls are getting because they're watching it too, starting at very young ages. And so you're getting this whole generation of boys who think that what sex means is to choke a girl and make her cry. And girls are thinking that this is what sex is and that they need to be into it, and that they need to be into anal, and that they need to like being choked. And it's not to demonize those kinds of acts with two consenting adults who have not been morphed into liking that because they were just exposed to it at a young age, but two consenting adults who genuinely are interested in those things can engage in that. And it's totally fine. It can be beautiful. But it's the way that, because the porn industry is morphing us, because what's most exciting or titillating or taboo is what makes it to the homepage. So this is what people are getting the message of. So the topic of the younger generation, it's so scary. And a great person in this field is Melinda Tankard-Reese, who I interviewed on my podcast recently. And she is part of a foundation that really explores and tries to get the message out about what this is doing to the younger generation. Because in schools, they're seeing it. It's crazy. Young boys telling their teachers that they're going to rape them. And the amount of sexual assault from young boys is on the rise. Which is just, it's not, and the thing is, it's not their fault in the sense of not to blame these young boys, but it's like the porn industry is really to blame. And the fact that we don't talk about it is to blame.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it's terrible, right? We almost just missed that wave when we were growing up. I feel quite grateful for that. But then I guess what yeah, that other strand that talked about, it's that that disconnect with intimacy and erectile dysfunction, performance anxiety, premature ejaculation. Like, what's the link between that, and why does it happen? Why is there a link?
Yeah. So that's one of the things with modern day high speed internet porn is just how intensely stimulating it is on a dopaminergic level. The insane amount of variety and just you pushing on the dopamine button within an intensity and a speed that we've never really been able to replicate before. And when you have something that's so highly dopaminergic in that way, what happens is your brain gets accustomed to it and it escalates. And so you end up needing more and more extreme things in order to get the same level of arousal. And you need not only more extreme things, you need novelty. You need, oh, okay, I need something new. I need a new video. Because the attention span has gone down to zero, right? Like kids can't watch anything longer than 3 minutes, right? And so what this does is it trains your brain that what's going to arouse you is highly stimulating, highly novel, changing, dynamic, really intense. And so when you then try to have sex with just a normal partner and it just doesn't do it, your brain doesn't recognize those signals, especially if you look at how often you're doing one versus the other. If you spend 7 years watching porn every night and getting this high level stimulus, and that's what you associate with arousal and sex, and then you have one experience, it's not going to outweigh it. And so the neural pathways in your brain are just associating arousal with whatever kind of kinky genre that you've gone down the rabbit hole of that you think is your thing.
Yeah. And so then the impact of that is, yeah, psychologically, people do struggle to get it up, or they do finish too fast, they can't finish at all, or
Mm-hmm.
performance, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. I would say more the erectile dysfunction and delayed ejaculation is more common.
Mm-hmm.
The finishing delayed ejaculation is something that's more and more common where a guy can't get it up, or even if he can get it up, he can't orgasm because he needs such a high level of stimulus. And then this leads into the conversation of how this impacts relationships and all of that.
Which is what I was going to ask you, like, what, I guess, without this sounding too obvious a question, but what is the impact on intimacy and relationships? And are we purely talking romantic relationships, or is there an impact on platonic relationships as well?
Yeah. There's so many impacts and they're so varied. They're so diverse that it's different for each relationship. Some of the common ones, one is just the ways that it causes a rift in the relationship when you're hiding your behavior, when you're lying about it, keeping it a secret, living a double life. Often that is the biggest source of betrayal in a partnership. Betrayal trauma is a really big topic in the porn addiction recovery world, where a man has been hiding this and then his partner finds out that for years or decades, their partner has been hiding it. And there's this sense of betrayal. I don't even know who this person is. I thought this was my husband or my partner, but there's almost a PTSD kind of response because they feel shocked that this person is so different. So that's one of the main things, is the ways that it causes that lying and hiding and secretive behavior. Obviously, it can also impact intimacy in terms of jealousy or feelings of insecurity. For example, if a female partner knows that their male partner is watching porn stars every night and they're thinking, oh, especially then if it's exacerbated with the man not being able to get it up or perform, or then they're thinking, oh, am I not attractive enough? And all these kinds of issues. And if a man, a lot of times men will end up preferring porn over sex with their partner. So again, that can be another issue. Financial issues, if they're spending money on subscription sites, or if it escalates into cheating or to prostitution. There's so many ways that it can impact. And then there's also just the subtle thing of a lot of times men will want to reenact what they're seeing in porn with their partner. And their partner will notice, oh, it feels like you're treating me like a porn video. Like it doesn't feel like you're present. You're
Mhm.
just trying to reenact what you saw in porn. So those are some of the more common ways. In terms of whether or not it can impact non-romantic relationships, definitely. The ways that it can make you less present, just steals your time and attention. This is one of the reasons I ended up quitting is I realized it was keeping me from real relationships, even with my friends,
Mm.
going and doing the things I wanted to do. Instead of going camping for a weekend with friends, I would want to stay home and watch porn.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
so yeah, it can definitely impact your other relationships as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Look, I guess, only the last couple of questions really, but I guess that's the message that you want to get across is like, it's not a life sentence, right? I think often people can feel that way with some of these things, but you've talked before, like you're training the brain, because that was something I didn't know anything of when I was really struggling. And I thought this is my brain now. And actually learning the concept of neuroplasticity was like a game changer for me, because I was like,
Yeah,
oh, I can change, and I can change my thoughts. And I guess that's the message here, right? Is you can change, but also what I'm getting a sense of, and tell me this is wrong, but your message isn't necessarily to like, we'll just stop porn, just never use porn again. But it's that you can use it if you understand how it impacts your life, and if you feel that it has a positive impact. Or is that not really the message? Would it be like, all being well, you shouldn't really be using this stuff?
great question. First of all, let me talk about neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is so important. And that was the big thing for me also, is understanding that what I'm doing with my mind and with my attention is strengthening those neural pathways. That every time I engage with porn and log onto a porn site, I am hardwiring the pathways of lust and craving and seeking escape. And I was very much the one responsible for deepening into my addiction. The flip side of that is that you can carve new neural pathways by changing your attention. And that's what mindfulness is. So like mindfulness, neuroplasticity, understanding these things is so powerful. One of my favorite quotes, which changed my life, was just this quote that neurons that fire together wire together.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's just that understanding that the more you use a certain neural pathway, the stronger those pathways become.
Yeah.
And that's what had gotten me sucked into lust and craving and just staring at women, is because I had been hardwiring those pathways for a decade. And it was also my pathway out of my struggle. It was, oh, okay, if I want to have more contentment and gratitude in my life, I can hardwire those neural pathways to the point where they become stronger than the neural pathways of lust and craving. And it's a matter of training. It's, can you train your mind and cultivate those neural pathways? And that's essentially what secular Buddhism is. It's training your mind and cultivating wholesome mind states. So I hope every guy really understands that, yes, it's not a life sentence. Your brain remains plastic well into later life, and there's always hope to break free. And it takes not just training your mind. There's other things involved in this: having accountability, being a part of community, getting support, being vulnerable, being around other men, and letting go of shame, realizing you're not alone. There's so many things that will help you recover. So it's not just okay, let me force myself through sheer willpower to break free from this. In terms of that question, can you keep watching porn and it's just about having a healthy relationship, or is it like, yeah, it's just better off not watching it? What I would say is, my stance on this, first of all, let's caveat this with saying that the porn industry is inextricably linked with sex trafficking, with mistreatment of the porn performers. There is so much on the ethical question side of this that it's not a simple kind of, oh, can you watch it and have no harms? Because the truth is that there are so many harms from the porn industry. The amount of sexual assault and rape and non-consensual videos that are on these major platforms, it's just astounding. And so we need to just say that, to then say, if we were talking about a world where all of the porn out there was completely ethical and there was no greater ethical question about how it was produced or the consent of the actors or anything like that. The question is it healthy? And in my mind, the harms outweigh the benefits so drastically that for 99.9% of the male population, at least, you're just better off not doing it. And then particularly if you've had an addiction to porn, if you've had a compulsive relationship with porn or with any kind of, if you have an addictive behavior with video games or social media or junk food, it's just such a risky thing to try to have a healthy relationship with. And you're just better off not engaging with it at all. It's not an essential part of a thriving human life. You do not need porn to have a thriving, beautiful, happy life. And so you're just so much better off saying, knowing the risks of this. It's, yes, some people can have a healthy relationship with heroin. Some people. But it's, do I want to risk testing to see if you're playing with fire? It's like, why risk it when it's not bringing that much benefit to your life at all? And the potential risks are just so drastic. Just don't do it. That being said, if somebody is like, hey, I really feel like it actually is improving my life, it's benefiting my relationship, power to you. But I would say that a lot of people aren't aware of the harms it's causing. So many people don't realize the consequences of watching porn because a lot of the consequences are subtle and downstream, meaning that they're not these kind of obvious consequences like they might be with some hard drugs. It's things that build up slowly over time because of the way they're impacting your neurobiology, your dopamine, your expectations of intimacy. And so a lot of these things are very hard to see. And so if you're going to go down that route of saying, hey, I have a healthy relationship with it, you really have to have a lot of self-awareness and humility to say, am I bullshitting myself? And I just want to watch it because it feels good.
Yeah. And no one could claim like with 100% certainty they've got a healthy relationship, right? Because you don't, I very much doubt that person knows exactly what's going to be happening to their neurons every time they fire up a video. And maybe I'm wrong, but does anyone have such a deep enough understanding of themselves and their brain and everything else to know with certainty that it's healthy, quote unquote?
But to play devil's advocate, you could argue that with any behavior or substance. You could say the same with a glass of wine. You could say the same with playing online chess. You could say the same with any kind of behavior and say, well, you don't know for sure if it's good for you. So at some point you do have to say, no, it actually, when I'm really honest with myself, it seems like this actually is benefiting my life, and that's okay. But to really just be a little bit skeptical with something like porn, which again is so normalized in our society that sometimes we don't realize that it's actually negative.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That's all my questions.